Hello, it's Reverend Tony here. It's great to see you. Well, I can't see you, but it's great that you can see me as we join together in another collective worship. This is collective worship for week 6, which should be the first week after half term. Some of you I know have gone back to school, maybe only part-time. Most of you I know have not yet gone back to school. But I hope you're managing all right, whether you're going into school or whether you're just staying at home. I do think about you every day, and I pray for all of you, as well as for your teachers and for your parents as well. So, we come to collective worship. I hope you've been enjoying the lovely weather that we've had over the last month or so. Did you know that it's been the driest and sunniest May since records began? Isn't that amazing? And now we've got to June and it's dull and it's raining. Isn't our weather strange? Isn't it strange how many people talk about weather so much of the time? Well, in a moment we're going to do some weather experiments. But first of all, we're going to begin with our opening responses. God is love all the time. All the time, God is love. So for our weather experiments today, we're going to make fog and we're going to make rain. That's interesting and exciting, isn't it? First of all, you need a big jar. This is a great big jar. This is just the sort of jar that we want. A clear glass jar, and what we need to do is to fill it with hot water right to the top. Not boiling hot water, but water that's pretty hot. So I've got some here in the kettle and I'm going to fill that up. Bring it over here. Fill it up so that you can see right to the top. You have to be careful if you've got hot water that you don't pour it over yourself in any way, because that will be very dangerous. You fill it right to the top, put the cap on, and then just leave it for a moment or two. I'll put the kettle back. This is the first experiment that we're going to do, but there's something else that I need. We've got hot water in the jar, got a little strainer here, sort of tea strainer thing, and now we're going to need some ice. So excuse me just a moment while I get the ice out of the freezer. Here's some ice. I think we've got more than we need. We're going to put it into the strainer and then you'll be able to see what we're going to do with it in just a moment or two. I'll just put it like that. For this next experiment, the second one, while this is just getting ready, we need to fill this up with water. Just ordinary cold water will be fine for that. I'll put that there and then you'll be able to see what we're going to do with that one in just a moment. Now, I think this is all right. It's been there for a minute or so, so we're going to, it's quite hot. I'll get an oven glove and we're going to pour away all the water apart from just a little bit at the bottom. Now, before we do that, I want you to see that this is completely clear, isn't it? You can see that there, completely clear on the inside and the outside. Now we pour away nearly all of it. I'm just going to leave about an inch of water at the bottom. And now we're going to put the strainer with the ice cube over the top. And we're going to see what happens. This experiment is the one that's making fog. So we'll see what happens. And already I can begin to see that this is fogging up on the inside, because that's how fog is made. The hot air that's rising from here, from the water at the bottom that's left, and because the glass jar has been warm already, the hot air is rising as hot air does, and the cold air that's coming from the ice is beginning to melt, so you'll see a few drops, but the cold air is going down, and when they meet together, the hot air going up and the cold air coming down, fog is created. And that's why you get fog most of all in the autumn, when the ground and the earth is warm and the sky and the clouds are cold. And you can already see on here that it's fogging up. You'll probably be able to see it a bit better, but if not, you'll just have to take my word from it. And you notice that the fog is on the inside, not on the outside, because if I try and draw a cross on there, well, it's not working because the fog is on the inside. It's steaming up on the inside because of the fog that's coming up there. So that's the first experiment, making fog, and it will carry on doing that. The second experiment, we filled this jar with cold water, and now we're going to make some rain. I'm going to spray some shaving foam over the top of it. And you will notice, let's just get rid of this bit of ice because we don't need any more ice. You'll notice that the shaving foam is on the top here. It doesn't sink down. Cold water, shaving foam, and now I'm going to pour in some drops of food colouring just into the top there, and we'll see what happens. And you can see it's beginning to rain. The food colouring is dropping down. And that's because of what happens with real clouds. The clouds, when they get really heavy, then they allow the rain to drop down onto the ground. So we've made some fog, and it's fogging up quite nicely, and we've watched how rain works dropping from the clouds. Those are our experiments for today. And did you know that Jesus talked a lot about weather himself? He talked about sunshine and he talked about rain, and we need those. My seedlings that I will show you require sunshine and rain, and they're doing really well, as you can see. Let's have a look. I'm going to bring them over here, and you can see how they're getting on. They were tiny when we first started near the beginning of term, but you can see here, these ones are growing really well. These are the aubergine seeds that were tiny when we first looked and took a long time to germinate, but they're growing very strongly. They're just about ready to be planted out or taken out to the greenhouse. The lettuce ones over here are doing okay. They're not doing quite as well as I hoped, but they probably will put on a spurt quite soon. We need sunshine and rain, warmth and light and fresh air for our seedlings to grow really well. As I said, Jesus spoke about weather, not because he was particularly interested in growing seedlings for himself, but because he wanted us to learn from the messages that he was telling. So this is what he said in Luke's Gospel, chapter 12. Jesus said to all the people, "As soon as you see a cloud coming up in the west, you say, 'It's going to rain.' And it does. When the south wind blows, you say, it's going to get hot. And it does. Are you trying to fool someone? You can predict the weather by looking at the earth and sky, but you don't really know what's going on right now. Why don't you understand the right thing to do? That's what Jesus said on one occasion. On another occasion, he also referred to the weather, and this is what he said in Matthew chapter 16. If the sky is red in the evening, you say the weather will be good. But if the sky is red and gloomy in the morning, you say it's going to rain. You can tell what the weather will be like by looking at the sky, but you don't understand what is happening now. I wonder what Jesus meant when he was talking about not understanding what is happening now. Well, of course, Jesus lived a long time ago. Jesus lived before there were any worries about climate change or global warming. The people in those days were worried more about the politics of what was going on in their country. We today have our own worries. We're worried about the coronavirus pandemic, and we're worried about climate change and global warming. But we're also worried about how we look after one another and how we care for one another. On another occasion, Jesus again referred to the weather. You have heard people say, "Love your neighbours and hate your enemies." But I tell you to love your enemies and pray for anyone who ill-treats you. Then you will be acting like your Father in heaven. He makes the sun rise on both good and bad people, and he sends rain for the ones who do right and for the ones who do wrong. If you love only those people who love you, will God reward you for that? If you greet only your friends, what's so great about that? You must always act like your Father in heaven. So that's about how we treat one another. The final story that Jesus told was also about weather. Jesus said, "Anyone who hears and obeys these teachings of mine is like a wise person who built a house on solid rock. Rain poured down, rivers flooded, and winds beat against that house. But it did not fall because it was built on solid rock. Anyone who hears my teachings and doesn't obey them is like a foolish person who built a house on sand. The rain poured down, the rivers flooded, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Finally, it fell with a crash." Jesus wants to make sure that we build our lives on something that is firm and solid and will last. So we're going to sing a song now, a song about the wise man and the foolish man building their house. And then I'm going to lead us in a prayer.
The wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock, and the rain came tumbling down. The rain came down and the floods came up. The rain came down and the floods came up. The rain came down and the floods came up, but the house on the rock stood firm. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon the sand, and the rain came tumbling down. The rain came down and the floods came up. The rain came down and the floods came up. The rain came down and the floods came up, and the house on the sand fell flat.
So let us pray. You might want to put your hands in a safe place as I say this prayer. Dear God, thank you for all the good things you give us. Thank you for our families and friends. Thank you for our school and our teachers. Thank you for the weather, for sunny days and for rainy days, because humans, like plants, need both. Help us to understand what you are saying to us. Help us to know what is going on in these difficult times. Help us to support all those people who are struggling because of the coronavirus. Help us to love not only the people who love us, but all people, regardless of what they look like or sound like. Amen. I hope you've enjoyed our closing worship. I'm really looking forward to coming back into school and seeing you again before long. We'll finish with our closing responses. God is love, all the time. All the time, God is love. Go and show that love to everyone.